I'm Fredrik Gerten, and I'm the filmmaker.
And I'm Leilani Farha, and I'm the advocate.
So we are back, and this is like episode 21. Could you imagine when we started that would be actually a 21st episode?
No, never thought so. And we're not sick of each other yet, or are we?
Maybe it's the distance is good for our relation, you know.
That's right.
Just
the
airwaves.
airwaves.
For a long time. There's actually some good news here. We just reached country number 90. So we have audience in 90 countries following us.
Fantastic. Which was country number 90?
It was Pakistan. So welcome
Amazing.
to our listener. I think still it's only one.
Just one.
But remember, if you have friends in countries that don't listen to us, tell them. And also tell them to invite friends. We also actually have almost like a league. Most listeners in Sweden, number 2, United Kingdom, and then Canada, number 3. But the US is always, sometimes, you know, I'll call you, say, oh, no, today the US passed you. So Canadians, if you want to keep the Americans behind, you better shape up. And you
Step up, Canada.
And you, our dear friends in the United States, do you really think that a small country like Canada should have more? Can't work out anyway.
That's right. So 1/10 the size. We are 1/10 the size of the USA. Come on.
Yeah. The whole idea is to bring in friends to the podcast because we don't have any money to produce it. And we don't have any promotional resources. So our resources are you, our friends. Then we have a 5th country in listeners, and that's a country that is competing with the Netherlands of being number 5, but it's actually Germany. So with listeners in Germany, we are actually going to have a Berlin special today. And we have then, of course, also a special guest, and that's Florian Schmidt, who was a part of Push the Film. So welcome to PUSHBACK Talks, Florian.
Hi.
Welcome.
We've been saying so many times that Berlin is like the leader in the world in fighting back. So what is the atmosphere right now in Berlin?
This weekend, again, we had big mobilizations on the streets against a big company from Sweden right now who's buying like 4,000 flats in the city with fresh money from the financial market. So still a lot of activities in the neighborhoods and still a lot of networks in civil society. On the other hand, I think people are a little bit proud of what politics did in the last years because of that kind of, mobilizations and strong acclamations of civil society. So I think people are hoping that things will get better on the one hand, but they still know that this is a fight that has not ended yet, and there are a lot of things to do.
It is really interesting. You know, Leilani, the company, the Swedish company, actually with a Norwegian owner, buying into Berlin now, is called Heimstaden. And they have their headquarters just 1 block away from where I live, and they own a lot of buildings in my neighborhood. And you can see when they do the renovation, they come with a crane and they put like a metal barrel, and then they empty an apartment in 30 minutes. And then they go in and then they put in new kitchens so they can put up the rent. So it's like a machine. And when we were in the Czech Republic, we were told that Heimstaden had bought 44,000 apartments in the Czech Republic from Blackstone. So I think it's really cool that we keep sharing information with each other, you, the activists in Berlin and Barcelona and around the world, to understand what's going on, because it's kind of a big energy. And Florian, in the Push the Film and in our podcast, we talked a lot about the biggest private equity fund in the world, Blackstone. There was a story in a German magazine, Tagesspiegel, yesterday or today, and the story is about Blackstone is one of the bigger owners of housing in Berlin, but nobody knew about it. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I'm not the one expert on Blackstone and all that stuff, but I think we have a lot of fine research on that issue in the last year. And today, really, or yesterday, was published a new research, and it becomes more clearer that Blackstone is really a kind of tax avoidance project. That means they have a complex system of how to avoid paying taxes, and this is their big business. They're not so much in maybe we want to modernize houses, we want to build houses, but they invest money and then they don't pay the tax. And we didn't have any information about this company before these researchers. So one of the main problems of Germany is that, maybe in other countries as well, I guess, that kind of secretness of who is the owner of a property and what is his background, his financial background, and what is happening behind the scenes.
So you actually don't know who owns your house. You know, what do you say about that, Leilani?
Yeah, I mean, they call it beneficial ownership. So you might be able to find out that your house or your home or your unit is owned by some corporation and its number, corporation number 13759. But you don't actually know who owns that corporation. And I've been asked a lot, well, does it really matter? And of course, the answer is it matters in so many ways. I mean, it matters for the individual tenant because they want to know, especially at a time of economic instability, I mean, like right now in this pandemic, they want to know who is it that I would talk to if I run into problems with my rent and in my life, But then there's also the issue, and I think this is so interesting, this case of Blackstone not paying tax, because governments are saying having these investors come into our country is really important for the economy. How is it important for the economy? The tenants are paying tax and the owner is not paying any tax on the profits that they're making off of the tenants. How does that benefit Germany? How does that benefit the city of Berlin?
Well, I think it's in the center of the debate in Berlin as well, this kind of argumentation that we need investors, so let them come in. And the problem is the real estate lobbyist, they using a classical argument of how to push an economy, and they mix it with these classical economy argument that it might also be difficult, this argument that we need investors to come in to create jobs. Man, this is also a difficult argument for cities that makes them doing strange things, let's say. Using this argument for the investment in existing buildings is really not right, because the aim is not to create anything. The aim is only to make money with it, and at least people need to pay this with their rents. Sometimes it's not paying it with their rents, but paying it with the life quality, because they buy the houses, but they do not invest. They take out money, but the houses go down in the quality of whatever, the public space, the really big complexes of buildings from the 70s, and big companies buy it, and then they do not invest anything else.
So, but Leilani, you were looking into this because in the Tagesspiegel there it's a very nice graphic. You should find that story, because and you can translate it if you can't read German. Did you count how many companies you need to have before you to own one building in Berlin?
Yeah, 18 it appears. 18 different holding companies, and I haven't done the full analysis, but I certainly read the article, and there's a beautiful graphic to show. It's ridiculous. I mean, come on.
Blackstone has it legally based in Delaware, which is like a tax haven within the US. Mm-hmm. And then it went somewhere to the Cayman, was it? Or
That's
it's
right,
like
yeah.
Cayman Islands, and then you go to, so it jumps from tax haven to tax haven.
Yeah.
And then the amazing story for the people in Berlin is that it's hard to know who owns their house. And what I understand, there was activists in Berlin actually gathering information where people pay their rent. So they have been really trying to monitor who owns our city. And I think that's a recommendation to people everywhere around the world. Try to map your own city. Who are the new owners? Because I think we need to communicate that there is a takeover of our cities, and this is something we're talking about.
I don't know if this in other cities does exist like this, but there is really an interesting cooperation between activism, scientists, some foundations, political foundations, with media as well, to find out who's the owner of the houses, of the cities, of the neighborhoods. And I think what is now growing in Berlin is this critical consciousness, also the consciousness that this is a question of data, that of knowledge, and of and not only laws, not new laws, but also of that we want to know what is our city. And this consciousness makes us, maybe it opens a way that politics is not only fighting against concrete bad situations, but also to change the philosophy of what should be the real estate issue. It's also my own, let's say, my change in my thinking in the last 4 years, because at the beginning it was like we have to fight like crazy, and now we did really things in Berlin, and everyone says, okay, here things work different, but now what is on the long run the issue? What on the long run? How do we want to design our city, and not only with new buildings, but referring to what is the existing structure of the city?
And this is interesting because Florian, you are an elected official in Kreuzberg-Friedrichshain in Berlin, which is a neighborhood with almost 280,000 inhabitants. So it's a real city. And you can see on the map that you have all the global players coming in there. So Blackstone had a lot of houses, Heimstaden, Akelius, and of course a lot of big German entities. So you can see this influx of investments. The movement has been really strong in Berlin, and so you actually managed to get the new legislation, this rent cap legislation, which is like Berlin was like first, and I can see that both Denmark and now Catalonia has been very inspired by the example from Berlin, and I hope more cities around the world. Is this enough? I mean, because it's a 5-year rent cap, have you been able to freeze the situation a bit? What is the result?
Well, there is first results, but we also have to be conscious that rent cap is now in the first level, and it will enter in the second level in November, so in some weeks. And then next year, the Constitutional will judge if this law is okay or not. Maybe they say in parts it's okay, in other parts it's not okay. The first level was we freeze the new contract rents. The next level is we make them, the existing contracts rents, we put them down. So this is really a little bit revolutionary, because to put a rent down is like, what? It cannot be possible. And people really, and I was in Barcelona in this year in January, I think, and really people said, what's going on in Germany? They could not believe it, and everybody really has heart beating about this issue. If the Constitutional says it's okay to put rents down, let's see what happened. And then, of course, it's 5 years. We can make it more years, but I don't think it could be forever. So there's a necessity to make the whole thing good.
Yeah. What is your reflection, Leilani?
I have a couple of reflections. I have been watching this idea of the reduction of rents, as it's like a percentage of cost per square meter being reduced. And I was trying to argue the very same thing, but only in the context of the pandemic. I was suggesting to the government of Canada and other governments that during the pandemic we must reduce rents, based on household income because no one has any money. I mean, so many people are underemployed or unemployed. And just in the context of the pandemic, I was getting complete pushback. And in Berlin, you're suggesting for all the time as a reality. And so I love it. And I'm keeping my eye really closely on this because it's super important. One of the things I keep being told is that it's very difficult in certain jurisdictions to try to lower rents lower than what is considered the value of the property. And so, in other words, that you're playing with what they call valuation. It's a technical term, but so it's super important if it goes through in Berlin because it shows that there is a government willing to poke holes at what the market value of a property actually is, that it should be based on who's living there and what they can afford, affordability, not based on some crazy market.
I think it's interesting because the constitutional the first question of the constitutional now is if Berlin is allowed to do it or if not, the German federal government must do it. So the question about is it right to reduce the rent is not so much in the focus right now, but more if the city of Berlin, the city-state of Berlin, can really do that kind of stuff. But of course, then also this property issue will be in the center of the debate, and this is what is already happening. But the people they like it. So even people from conservative parties like it. So I think this experiment, even if the constitutional says, okay, Berlin could not have done it like this, it will have some effects on the consciousness, the political consciousness of everybody. And we have elections next year, federal elections, also Berlin elections the same day. Also district elections, all the same day in September. So it will be really interesting next year what happens and what kind of government we'll have in all these levels.
The other thing I wanted to raise, just if I might, is you were talking about how this, in order to make the kind of changes you're trying to do in Berlin, it's taken activists, it's taken the media, scientists, academics, grant makers, funding bodies, foundations, etc. And I think that's a lesson well learned for so many advocates around the world are trying to go up against these same kinds of patterns and actors, whether it's Blackstone or other private equity, or even sometimes it's governments themselves putting in place things that are really making life difficult for tenants. And so I think that's really interesting. I'd like to know if, Florian, how can you remember, how did it begin? Was there a trigger? Was there a moment? I have no idea how Berlin became such this hotspot.
It began, I would say 8 years before, 8 years, when people noticed that there is a problem. There's a problem with rising rents. And the government, it was a social democrat government, I think in coalition with conservatives, they said, oh, no problem, we don't have any problem here. And they also said things like, not everybody has the right to live in the center of the city. Mm-hmm. So there was a really a position against the Berlin government. And then we had a group of people who managed to organize a public votation that can, in the Berlin constitution.
So like a referendum or?
Referendum, yeah. Exactly, a referendum. They can propose a law, and they did it. And it was interesting because when they had all the signatures to then take the next step, then the government, the last government, not the actual government, they start to negotiate with them because they see it would be a great success and it would be really a problem for them politically. So they negotiated with them a new law and some new structures. But the next government, the actual government, really put that they installed it, and now we also have some changes that are really based on this negotiations with that initiatives about the referendum. So referendums are kind of mechanism in Berlin that also worked for other stuff, for like mobility issues, and also for the big former airport, Tempelhofer Feld, to keep it free of building and to make it a place of freedom and of green and leisurement. So this is one moment in the Berlin history of the last 10 years that this referendum initiative pushed politics.
But the conclusion from outside is that Berlin has very active citizens that really believe in the power of being a citizen and using the democratic tools that are in front of them, and it's quite inspirational. And last week in this PUSHBACK Talks, we had Jaime Palomares from Barcelona in, and he said when they were proposing a new legislation in Catalonia, they looked at Berlin. I guess you were in talks with him because I know you also you have deep roots also in Catalonia, so you're in connection. But it's Berlin is in active citizens, Berlin and Spain has a lot in common. So you are actually inspiring many of us. But I can also see that it seems like the city in the legislation has more in the toolbox than other cities around the world have. For example, there's a preemption right. So if there is a deal going on, the city can actually go in and stop it and say, no, we want to make this deal. So the city is actually can be quite proactive in pushing the market. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
This is really the issue which is mostly connected with also my personality in my function as a city district councillor. The right of preemption right. Yeah, this is based in the federal law of, let's say, construction law of urbanism law. It means that in some areas that must be declared areas of social protection because of some processes. You have to observe them scientifically, that people are pushed out, for example, or there's a danger that people are pushed out. So the structure of the city is changing. So then you have the right to avoid owners modernize their houses, and that would cause higher rents. So you can avoid these modernizations. This is the main issue about these areas of protection. But you also have the right to buy to buy buildings when another person is buying it as a city, as a district in this case. So the districts of Berlin, we have 12, have the right to buy. And this started also in a moment before we started this new legislation, which ends next year. So when I come to the office, it was already prepared. And it was also in the district of Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg where the people asked the local government to do it. Because there were some cases where people saw, wow, someone is selling their house, another one is buying it, but this is a kind of corrupt business. So we asked now the council, the city councillor, the district councillor to use this instrument, which have never been used in Berlin.
This is the story you're talking about in Push when you're interviewed by me in Berlin. You talk about this. You're actually buying houses. So you can keep people staying in your town. So are you still doing this? Are you still buying houses?
Yes, we're still doing it. We have, I think, in my district, it's about 40 houses and over 500 flats. But on the other hand, the buyer has also the possibility to sign a contract, and he obliges himself to protect the people. So there's a double effect. Every time we buy, we also pushing other buyers to sign these kind of contracts.
It's a way of not spending too much money, because money is also a resource, I guess. So it's a way of using the law, but then to negotiate with the new owner, so they actually behave like a more responsible landlord. That's what we all need in the world. We're not against landlords. We just want responsible landlords.
Yeah, and there are some they're buying it, and they in that let's say their business plan, they're including this kind of contract. They say, "Oh, we will sign it, of course." And others who say, "Oh, I will try not to sign it," and maybe they buy it, maybe not. So different cases. Now we have also a kind of movement that people say, "Okay, we want to buy it ourselves, not as a private person to then maybe resell it, no, but as a cooperative, as a collective property." So we have short time, it's only 2 months. Now the federal government will raise it to 3 months, which is the time we have to use this right from the moment on that when we know there's something going on. So people now really, in this short time, they're trying to find a cooperation, or sometimes they'll found a proper one. And then it's really like people want to have their own houses.
But this is like limited companies where people are not able to resell their own apartments. So it's like people cannot make a profit from their own.
Yeah, and it's not particular flats. It's still a building then. So it really makes sense. And there's also a question which is also debated here in Berlin, if this is good or not. But I am one of the person who says this is interesting, because if people put their own money in this procedure, and it's like not speculative money. It's not like they want to have a profit then 20 years after, but they can take the money as well. Some people now they're paying some €100 per each square meter in this kind of project, but for them it's more or less okay. I will have this money later. So, and I'm investing in my own security and in the city's structure. To keep it away from these investment.
The vulture funds,
yes.
The vulture money, the pension funds. But Leilani, I think there is here somewhere like a message to political activists, to mayors, to elected officials around the world. Florian is from the Green Party in Berlin. The government in Berlin are social democratic. The social democratic government 10 years ago sold out a lot of the public housing. Now they're buying back. The mayor actually said it was a mistake selling out. So, to all of you out there who've been happy with this kind of more deregulated housing market, maybe it's time to back down and say, okay, maybe it has gone too far, because now our houses in our cities become an investment objects for big money that with no local roots. So this is a message. I think you should all plan, when the pandemic is over, plan a visit to Berlin, go and talk to Florian and his colleagues and have a look into the movement. There's a lot of inspiration coming out from Berlin.
But what's so amazing, like as an outsider and someone working at the global level, what's so amazing about Berlin to me is that as you've said, Florian, the people of Berlin, first of all, recognize that they are and can be active citizens of the city. And more than that, they recognize that housing is a deeply political issue and one of the most major issues affecting their everyday lives. And they're taking it very seriously and forcing governments at all levels to engage in the housing discussion as a matter of being able to live a decent life. And for me, I take a lot of inspiration in that, because as I travel the world, I'm still having to convince some governments that housing is a central issue, that it is as important as climate change. And it's clear when I'm talking to Berliners and when I'm in Berlin, I have that sense of it's not that we shouldn't work on climate, but only to say that this is such a pressing issue. I think the pandemic has exposed it even more, and that there are really interesting solutions out there, legislative solutions, as well as these more practical solutions like the idea of cooperatives and land, community land trusts, etc. And that we need to start looking at this, I think, intergenerationally. Frederick knows his film Push has been incredibly well received and warmly received by young people. And that says something, and so has our podcast, in fact, and that says something to me. It says to me that young people understand that this issue is a matter for them as they move forward or try to move forward with their lives. And so we need to start imagining housing in the future. And that's what I like about these community land trusts and cooperatives. I don't have a that's the best solution, or but I think they're interesting, as you said, Florian, because it starts that conversation about how do we ensure affordability for young people so they can live in the cities where they want to live. I think young people are pretty scared about that. They're looking, I can go to, they can't even go to university where they would like to in so many places because they can't afford, Frederick and I did a podcast on this, they can't afford to live in the city where the university is. They're sleeping in their cars in some cases, I'm interested to know too, are the Berliners who are on the streets, do they tend to be young as well?
Yes, they tend to be young. And I think it's a mix between this, what you are saying, that people really think, okay, this is our future, and the other thing is that there are some young people in Berlin are more interested in politics. I think one thing is that in Berlin right now we have a government which is doing good, but there is still not a strategy formulated about what's going on in the next 30 years. So it's like, okay, 5 years this, okay, we buy here, we buy there. And what now will happen is, because of elections as well, that everybody is now thinking, okay, but what's on the long run, the story? What can we do on the long run? What's really the aim? And I think one thing is, of course, continue a strong regulation, like rent cap 2 maybe, but on the other hand also to go on buying back, and there are different ideas how to do it. But if we now have in Berlin, and there are different statistics in different cities, like 25% of the housing stock is like not private. It's in the city hands or in cooperatives or foundations, whatever. And we pushed it already on maybe from 25 to 27 in this last 4 years, which is not so bad. It's like 2% of the whole stock is not. It's a lot. So if we project this to 30 years, then we really have the opportunity to make this private, not non-private, non-profit sector bigger. And maybe then, in some days, people. I analyzed a little bit children books about these issues. There's also always a story that a bad investor in cooperation with the city wants to put on a sport place a shopping center, or for girls it's a pony, the horse ranch. They want to put a shopping center on the horse ranch for children. And this image is really deeply rooted in the consciousness of the people, that real estate is of investors and the city is cooperating with investors. So we have to change this, and we can change it also if we have a long-term strategy. But this strategy will never be monolithic. It must be maybe 10 different sub-strategies, but to make it a plan is a thing which I am working on now with other peoples, also from Green Party, and to really call everybody to collaborate in this plan and make the city different in some years.
I think it's interesting when you talk about this sense of the city is ours. So when the this kind of relation between the city and the investors is like a relation that it's happening beyond us. There was this amazing story from Istanbul where they were about to build a shopping mall in the Gezi Park, like in the middle, like a loved park in Istanbul. And it one day it was like a few hundred protesters and the police came and smashed them. The day after there were like 2,000 people and the police came and smashed them. The day 3 it was many, many more. The police came. Day 4 it was 2 million people all over Turkey. So it's like you can feel that there is something, sometimes the politicians, and in a very corrupt relation to the real estate industry, is stepping too much on the feelings of the people, or the feeling of this is our city, and you can't come here and just put your ugly face on top of it. And I think this resistance is existing all over the world. But of course, it's tough to go up against this. And of course, then the politicians and the industry have this kind of political language that sells this is good for development, or you don't like it, you're anti-development, blah, blah, blah. It's all this language. So
socialist, you're socialist.
Yeah, and then they have the red card, the communist card. But it's interesting in Germany because that conflict is not so obvious, because the movement has been able to move also more traditional, liberal, right-wing people into understanding that, yes, housing is a human right. This is the language of Leilani Farah. Housing is a human right. And this, when I checked the German debate, housing is a human right is up there all the time. And Leilani, I think your work has had some impact.
I don't know what impact it's had, but we have to keep reiterating that it is this human right. I think that's super important, especially because the government of Germany itself at national level is quite committed to housing as a human right. When I was the UN Special Rapporteur, they were very supportive of my mandate. They continue to be supportive of the mandate, and they have been since it was first established. And so it does mean something to them. And so it's really important to keep that pressure on them to come good and do what's necessary to protect that right.
Do you have any final message from Berlin to our listeners, Florian?
Well, I think Berlin is a really international city, and a lot of, we call expats here, they're also fighting with us here. It's not about, as some people now who are against all this kind of rebellion, they say, oh, you want to shut down Berlin, you want only for the Berliners, and that's not true. We are here really fighting for that everybody can live in the city with affordable conditions. And there are also another projects. It's not only about housing, it's also about climate change, about mobility, to take back the streets as well. So I think really inspiring city right now, and a lot to do, and with the international networks who are really present here, it's much more interesting for everybody to come to Berlin and to go to the world from Berlin.
It's nice. I love to close on a positive note, because yes, we are like optimists, and I think that by seeing people fighting back, pushing back, as we say, around the world, you get inspiration. And I also want Pushback Talks to be an inspirational podcast. And friends out there, check out Pushback Talks, share with friends. If you want to support us financially, go to patreon.com, look for Pushback Talks. You can then support us every month. It helps a lot, because it's tough to run this without any money. But cool. Thank you for being with us, Florian. And Leilani, do you have any final positive notes? Have any flowers to send out?
I have lots of flowers and lots of positivity, because it's so nice to be in conversation with you, Florian, and you, Frederick, because I need inspiration. The work I'm doing with The Shift is, I sometimes feel very lonely, And so inspiration from Berlin is really wonderful. So thank you so much, Florian, and all those out in Berlin who have been really pushing to make change.
Thank you, Frederick, to invite me, and you.
Thank you very much, Florian, and thank you, Leilani. And go and look for Tagesspiegel, the story about Blackstone. You can see 18 different companies to own a house in Berlin, and the people living in the house don't even know who owns the building. So journalism can also make a big difference. And so keep telling stories, keep fighting back, pushing back. See you soon. Ciao, Leilani.
Bye, Frederick.
Pushback Talks is produced by WG Film. To watch Push, visit pushthefilm.com. You can also support us by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/pushbacktalks. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.